Box 42J, LaFontaine, Indiana, being interviewed for the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program on Thursday night, October 3rd, 1985. And this interview is by George Dingledine. Gary, the first question I'm going to ask you is tell me when you were born, where you were born, and who your parents were.
I was born December 29th, 1948, Cincinnati, Ohio. My parents are Warren Heath and Betty Heath. My mother is deceased. And
Mother's maiden name?
Collier, C-O-L-Y-E-R.
C-O-L-Y-E-R. And were your parents from this area?
No, my parents were from Somerset, Kentucky. And we moved here. My dad worked with General Motors, and when the plant opened in Marion, the GM plant opened in Marion, we moved to Indiana.
Yeah. Now, how many in the family?
I had 3 brothers. My oldest brother is deceased. He was a Marine, Vietnam veteran. And then I have a younger brother, Charles Wayne, and a younger one yet, David Michael Heath.
No sisters?
No sisters.
Yeah. Your mother and father came here then to work for General Motors. And
my father did.
Yeah, and settled in LaFontaine and went
Right.
back and forth to Marion.
Right.
Yeah. Grandparents, where are they from, and where do they live?
They're all deceased,
Yeah.
but they were from Somerset, Kentucky. And he was a veteran of World War I. My grandfather was.
On your father's side?
On my father's side.
Yes.
On my mother's side, no.
Yeah. Do you remember your grandparents when you were
yes.
a kid? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Remember seeing them and everything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Tell me about your life, and went to grade school and high school, and when did you graduate and all that, and what did you do and so forth?
Well, I went to grade school in Cincinnati, Ohio, and when I was in the 4th grade, we moved to Indiana, and I went to LaFontaine Elementary and junior high, and then the school burnt down. So in my 8th grade year, we moved. They sent the LaFontaine students to Lincolnville, and after 1 year, then Southwood High School opened up. I was with the first class at Southwood in 1962. I graduated in 1966, and then after my time in the service, I attended Ball State University and graduated with a BS degree from Ball State in 1975.
When you graduated from high school, what happened? What'd you do?
Well, I don't know. My oldest brother joined the Marine Corps earlier that year, and the Vietnam War was starting, and I felt that I wanted to be part of that, so I joined. I was 17 years old. I joined the Marine Corps in August 1st of 1966. And from there I went and I took my boot camp at San Diego, California. I was a Hollywood Marine, as they say. And I spent 3 months in boot camp and about 6 or 8 weeks at Infantry Training Regiment, ITR, at Camp Pendleton. And I came home for Christmas leave and went back after that to Pendleton for a period of time.
Yeah. Was your training all directed toward Vietnam at that time?
Oh, yes.
Everyone knew that they were going there sooner or later.
They trained us for war. It's my understanding today, the Marine Corps has a lot of pride, and they used to manhandle us in boot camp, and it's my understanding today that they no longer hit the troops, but at that time it was a period of war, and they were preparing us for war. We were taught, how to kill or be killed, what it took to stay alive. We were treated as such too. If one person in the boot camp messed up, then everybody in the platoon suffered. If one man fell short, everybody had to carry him. It was that sort of training.
Was it good training as you look back now, or?
Oh yes, I'm glad I had that sort of training before I went to Vietnam. There's no way looking back on it, I take a great deal of pride in it. At the time, I wasn't real pleased, but you know, looking back, I was glad I had that sort of training. I was hardened. I was a young boy. I was, you know, a boy, and they beat some sense into you. And it took that. We were well trained on different weapons, how to fire rifles, how to shoot a man, hand-to-hand combat, throwing grenades. I shot every major weapon that, you know, an infantryman might carry, you know, and so I was adept at handling myself. It was more of a matter of confidence or discipline more than it was. I mean, you know, it's like you come out of boot camp and you feel like you can whip the world, but you get whipped instead. The confidence factor, you know, meant a lot.
Well, then, after your advanced training, you went back to Pendleton for a little while longer for what, more training, or?
Well, my brother was in country at the time, in Vietnam, so I didn't have orders right away. I went back to Pendleton, and it was I was permanent party, you might call it. My original MOS was a 1391. I was in fuel. And my brother was in the infantry in Vietnam, and so about June or July of '67, I got word he was wounded over there, and plus I'd had several letters from him, and I felt a sense of uselessness, so I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and I wanted to get him out because I felt, you know, they said if two brothers were in country at the time, one could leave if the other wouldn't come in. And at the time, I wasn't in any infantry division, so I felt that I'd do him a favor, which he never stood for. You know, he wasn't about to leave. So in June of '67, I volunteered to go to Vietnam. So I came home for about 20 days leave, and then I went back to Camp Pendleton for staging battalion. That's where they prepared us for jungle warfare. We were taught a lot of things, mostly weaponry in boot camp and ITR, but the staging battalion was genuine combat situations, plus physical training. They were really into physical training. And I found out why later, you know, the heat of the jungle and everything, you had to be in shape.
When you leave now after this 28-day leave, what was the reaction, or as you look back now on your parents as you left? Your brother had already been wounded, and what was your mother was still living then? Yeah, and what?
Well, I was married when I came. From boot camp and ITR, I was married December 24th, 1966, right out of high school. I fell in love with my high school sweetheart. And Peggy and I, my wife Peggy Heath, and I were married December 24th. So as I prepared to go to Vietnam in 1967, I came home, and well, I had my doubts. I mean, I didn't know if I was going to live or if I was going to die, and you know, man wants to live on, and but I also felt that I had a duty to perform. It's something that I've been indoctrinated with from the time I was old enough to understand the English language, you know, through the movies and TV and whatnot. And my father was a veteran of World War II, a Navy man.
Example.
Right, I have the examples. My brother was a Marine, so I felt that I was doing the right thing, and I wanted to be a part of it. I didn't want it to go on without me. I felt it would be more humiliating not to be a part of it than it was to be a part of it, by far and away. I would think I had no real, what you could say, a bad feeling or an ill feeling about it, other than the day I left. I had a sadness come over me about leaving my wife, who I was very much in love with and still am today. But as far as going to serve my country, I wanted it. It was what I was taught, and I was prepared for it. I didn't want to die for it, but I was prepared to go.
Mhm.
But I didn't think of death
Uh-huh.
at that time.
Yeah. After your advanced training, then jungle training and physical conditioning, what happened? Were you assigned to a battalion or a company, or were you going as a replacement, or?
At that time, it was during the Johnson years, President Johnson's years, and I think when I went over, it was the largest, well, I should say, influx of troops since World War II. There was 25,000 of us sent over by air and sea within a matter of 3 days there. There was a great many of us. The escalation of the war was picking up. And I flew from El Toro, California to Okinawa, and I spent approximately 18 hours in Okinawa, and then they put us on a 747 and flew us into Da Nang. I was in Da Nang within 4 days after I left the States.
Mm-hmm.
And Da Nang was more or less a transient station
Mm-hmm.
for most incoming troops.
Yeah. What was your first impression of Vietnam when you landed at Da Nang? Were they shelling the field, or was there
No.
anything going on?
No, there was nothing like that at the time. As a matter of fact, it was kind of strange because I remember there were stewardesses on the plane, and I thought, I can't be going into combat. Here, this woman, or these women, and they were dressed in fatigues. And I remember landing. There's a sort of an empty feeling about it. You know, there's no way you can go back, and you don't know what lies ahead, so it's like you're on your own. I really felt on my own, because most of the troops that I'd had my training with, I wasn't with at the time. We were being sent to different areas, and I remember a chow hall, and I remember there at the chow hall, there were these names written all over the boards on this chow hall. And at that time, I really sensed, or I had a sense of death at the time, because as I was looking at these names, I was trying to remember, or trying to think how many of them were alive today, how many of them had died. You know, it was where the incoming troops were.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my only contact with that chow hall. Even when I was ready to leave Vietnam, I didn't pass that. It must have been a different staging area for us.
Mm-hmm.
No, there were no shellings early on. After I arrived at Da Nang, then I was sent to Chu Lai. I spent my first 30, maybe 40 days in a place called Chu Lai. That was south of Da Nang. And this was before the war had really pumped up. And, well, it was on the stages of starting right then. So I spent the first 30 or 40 days there, and all I did was work in maintenance. I didn't understand my job or anything else. I was supposed to be with a fuel type setup, but I never was. And I remember I helped build a bunker for the CO. We built him a bunker that would withstand rockets or whatever. But the whole time I was there, the worst thing that happened was a typhoon. There was no real actual combat at July. And I arrived in Vietnam on September 7th, 1967. And mid-October, they started the surge north. So I was flown from Chu Lai on a C-130 to Dong Ha, North Vietnam, or Vietnam. And there, let's see, I worked in, I was dropped in the area where the ammo dump was, and the fuel tanks and the CBs were stationed. So for my first week to 10 days in Dong Ha, it was all at peace again. Well, I had experienced some incoming, but Dong Ha was a very large base, and incoming was a long ways off, and so no fears yet. And that would have been mid or late October. Let's see, from there, what happened from there on was I was loaned out, TAD they call it. I don't remember what the terminology means. I've tried to think about that in the last couple of days, but I just don't recall.
It's temporary attached duty or something.
Yeah, it was right, something to
Yeah.
that effect. And so for the rest of my tour in Vietnam, I was assigned to probably 2 or 3 different divisions.
And doing what? You must have started off with one group.
Right. Well, my first duty, what I started out with, I rode security on convoys. I rode convoys all over I-Corps between GLN, when it could be reached by road, which was on the DMZ, and Camp Carroll, the Rock Pile, Site X-Ray to Quezon. So I rode convoys for...
Now, these are big fire bases, or big bases.
Well, as you got away from Dong Ha was the largest base in that area, and from there on you went to smaller. These were support groups for the infantry movements, and a camp about the size of LaFontaine would be considered large, maybe a mile square, but that would be perimeter. The basic camp would be much smaller than that, yeah.
So what would your job be on the convoy then?
Well, I would carry a rifle, or I'd sit at a machine gun and I'd watch for any attack. The first couple of times out, everything went fine, and then, I don't know, my third, fourth, or fifth trip, I was involved in my actual first skirmish.
And what happened?
Well, they...
These would all run in daytime, I'm assuming.
Right. We were going from Dong Ha to Quezon, which was about 35 miles up the road. And once we got outside of what was called the Rock Pile and Camp Carroll were basically the same base, but once we reached a long curve there outside of the Rock Pile, then the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, started shelling us, and then they charged the convoy, and they blew up the lead truck, and the next thing I knew, I heard bugles blowing and whistles, and they came down off the hillside, and I was sitting in the back of this truck with a machine gun, myself and another guy, and we opened fire as they were coming down off the hill. The truck in front of us was blown up with a satchel charge. A Vietnamese come out of the bush and threw a satchel charge into it, and it was carrying a pallet of 105 rounds. And I remember when that thing came down, all I could see was two rear wheels. And I mean, of course, I hit the deck. The concussion blew me all the way from the front of the truck to the back of the truck, and it killed the man in the front of the truck I was in, not the driver, but the other rider. And I just happened to be sitting there. I was on what you call a quad 50. I was actually with, I was carrying a machine gun, my A gunner, myself, and the Army had a quad 50 sitting there. So we had an M60 carry it covered in the backside, and a quad 50, taken on the front. And I really sensed death. That was the first time I thought I was going to get killed. They killed several men that day. They come over the hill and they were overrun. It got into the hand-to-hand situation, which I avoided. I kind of jumped off the truck and laid in the bushes, and I was not a combat veteran at the time. That's the first time I got my first kill in Vietnam that day.
You were manning a machine gun then? Was it on a?
No, it was on a bipod.
Bipod, yeah.
But that's a hand carrying mount. Yeah. And as the action got heavy and I ran out of rounds, the initial thing that happened is I ran out of rounds, and I laid the gun down. It was empty, and then I jumped over the side of the truck because the convoy had come to a complete stop, and everybody was doing it because there was no sense standing there taking that kind of gunfire.
Yeah.
And so we got behind the trucks to use as a screen, and then I grabbed an M60 or an M16, and I had a 45. I wore a 45 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that day there was 16 Americans killed on that convoy, and I don't know how many wounded.
Yeah. Now, these skirmishes, they look fast,
oh, yes.
In and out. And what period of time would you say the whole thing was over?
That lasted, it seemed like a lifetime at the time, but I'd say maybe 5 to 8 minutes, because they brought in, as quick as we had gunfire and as quick as they could get choppers out of Dong Ha, they were bringing up choppers, and that was a heavy attack. I was on a couple of other convoys I was on a couple of other convoys that were hit, but that one lasted quite a while because they had totally blocked the road and stopped the convoy, and plus they felt like they were winning for a short period of time. And I think their psychology was is if they felt they had your head pinned down, they'd keep coming. But you know, it was over and done pretty quick.
Yeah. You beat them off and they took back off?
Yes. Once the choppers arrived, they left.
Yeah.
I don't know how many kills we had, but I'd guess there were a good 200 kills. We killed a couple of hundred of them. And I did notice blue uniforms, and I didn't know it at the time, but those were supposedly Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first time I'd encountered the thought of Chinese being involved in the Vietnam War.
Yeah. Then the convoy went on into...
Right. We went
Finished.
on into Quezon that day.
Yeah. How long were you at this one particular base then, running convoys? How many weeks or months?
Well, I would say, I was at Dong Ha running convoys from mid-October till Christmas Day. And then after Christmas Day, I was sent to Quang Tri, and that's where I hooked up with 1st Battalion, 3rd Marine Division. And that was during the start of the Tet Offensive. And from there, I ended up at several bases throughout my time in Vietnam, but I stayed at Quang Tri for maybe 2 months.
That's with 1st Marines?
1st Battalion, 3rd Marine Division.
3rd Marines, yeah. And what was your job there?
Well, at that time I was a corporal, and I had the experience. I had some combat experience, limited, and I set up perimeters. We kept extending the base at Quang Tri. It had a landing strip there, and it kept growing. So every week or so, we were moving farther out. And I wasn't there the whole time it grew, but it grew to be a tremendous base.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got involved in. I went on my first patrol there, and I went on night ambushes. I went on my first listening post. That's crawling through the jungle, getting out in front of everybody.
Yeah. What was the setup? This was basically a fire base, then, with a large fire base with a landing strip.
Right.
Yeah. And you were perimeter guard, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What was your life like on the?
Oh, I lived in a bunker for the whole monsoon season.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I ran out of dry clothes. I learned to drink coffee there.
Mm-hmm.
I had never drank coffee to speak of until that time in my life. And you get so cold at night, your muscles would jerk in your back, and you'd have to stay awake. I remember living on maybe 4 and 5 hours sleep at a time for, it seemed like forever, but we lived like rats. We'd build bunkers during the day from daylight until just before dusk. And then they'd bring chow out to us, and then we'd stand guard duty. And when you're first in Vietnam, or until you get enough experience behind you, it's hard for you to sleep. If you didn't want the first watch, the first watch is what you wanted, but if you got the second watch, you couldn't hardly go to sleep in the length of time between the first watch and the second watch. And after the second watch, it was 1 or 2 in the morning, and that was the graveyard shift, as we called it.
How many of you in a bunker?
In our hole, there was 4.
So it was 2 on and 6 off.
No, it was 1 guy at a time. 1
guy at a time.
And you'd try and cut your hours, but the problem is that you still had trouble in sleeping. And like I said, during that time was the Tet Offensive, and we received gunfire, and we were overrun once. They broke into the ammo dump there and started setting off the ammo dump, and there was quite a bit of action at Quang Tri. It wasn't the heaviest action I saw, but I also, during the daily patrols, we'd try and make peace with the villagers. And I remember the Rich Valley Church out here sent me clothes, and I gave them to the little Vietnamese kids because they had no clothes. And at that time, I still felt a sincerity or a sympathy towards the Vietnamese people, and I was trying to do my thing for them. I took a lot of pride in that, and I'm sure the church did too. But we went on daily patrols, and this worked fine until, and like I said, I had this sympathy towards the villagers, and then we started getting booby-trapped, and there were some guys that were killed and maimed, and I started slowly losing heart for them. I'm a small person, 5'7", and I was real small at the time, I was about 128 to 135 pounds, and I became a tunnel rat. I'd go into the bunkers. You carried a hand grenade and a 45 and a bayonet, and you'd crawl down into the holes. I'd always frag them. I'd throw in a grenade or two, and then I'd crawl down in. And I would say that was a very scary experience, especially the first few times.
Yeah. Where were the tunnels? Everywhere, or?
Oh yeah. Well,
There's a book written on that, incidentally. Now I see.
Oh, there is?
On the tunnels of Vietnam. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, a lot of them were in the villages.
In the villages?
Right. You go in and you'd discover a hole. All right. Well, you crawl down into the hole, and then next thing you know, it looks like that's the end of it. But you could push real hard on a wall, and fall over. Well, it was a fake hole, and then you'd find ammunition and opium and weapons, that sort of thing.
But you being the smallest,
Right.
Yeah, they would send you.
Plus, I was just an E4 at the time, a corporal.
Yeah.
So the smaller guys went in,
Yeah.
and plus they didn't, when you were first in country, they didn't throw that at you because you're still in a lot of shock. But I'd been in country then about that time, about 5 months, so I'm not saying I knew how to handle myself real well, but I was feeling a sense of confidence. Plus, I took no chances. I mean, I fragged them.
Yeah.
We'd ask them to come out. We had a Vietnamese interpreter. If anybody was in there, they'd tell them to come out. And
Did anyone ever come out?
yes, at one time there were 4 North Vietnamese that come out. 2 of them were wounded. It was kind of like foxhole buddies, I guess, who had been trapped. Their company had left them, and they came out that way. And then another time I found 8 dead North Vietnamese in a bunker, and another time I found probably $10 million worth of opium in one. I believe it was the setup for a hospital. We kept looking for a hospital trench or underground network, and we couldn't. The North Vietnamese used to shoot the opium or smoke it or something, and then they'd get such a high feeling that when you'd shoot them, they wouldn't drop. They'd keep coming. Mm-hmm. And there was no sense of pain, evidently, with it. And then another time I found, must have been 20 or 30 SKS 56s. That was a bolt action Russian weapon. And then I found several AK-47s, the automatic version of it.
But you're gradually, as you're in country, then you're not as friendly to the Vietnamese either, not knowing whether they're friendly or not. Anyhow,
well,
not knowing whether they're with you or against you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of the problem in Vietnam, is there were no perimeters per se. I mean, during the day they spoke with you, and during at night they might turn against you. It's like the village that was near Quang Tri where we were at. And I wasn't involved in fighting the Viet Cong. Our company's action was the North Vietnamese regulars. And the only people I felt sorry for were the Montagnards, the mountain people. There was a true sense of loyalty. I had heard on several occasions they had driven off companies of North Vietnamese with their sais and machetes and whatever. But the villager and all this, the ones that, some of them we turned capitalist. They would sell us blocks of ice for $5. They'd spit on you. It was, after I started seeing the death of our own troops, I started losing my feeling for them. And
cynical, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was sort of confusing. I went over with all the hopes of being what I felt my forefathers were, being an American.
Yeah.
And while I was over there, they were burning campuses, and Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and they were burning campuses. So not only did I lose my taste for America at that time, I had lost my taste for the Vietnamese. It was like we were alone. And it's a lonely feeling knowing that, if you die the next day, no one really gives a damn except your personal family. The Vietnam veteran at that point in time was just a statistic to most people.
Yeah.
Well, America was confused at the time. They didn't know whether they wanted to be in or out. And it caused a lot of problems for us because we weren't really allowed to win. I mean, we had the capability, the firepower.
We were talking about the feelings that you were having when you felt like you were sort of abandoned on both sides.
Really, and there was a place in Vietnam called Con Thien, Place of Angels. And David Douglas Duncan was a famous World War II photographer and on. He spent some time there. Now, I wasn't there at the time that he was. And at the time I was at Con Thien, there was a sign put on that road, and it said, on the entry, it said, "Through these gates walks the world's finest fighting man. He wears a green uniform and he calls himself a Marine." And then on the backside of it, as you were leaving, it said, "When you come back, bring some beer." And part of the story is after he spent time at Con Thien, he sent him back a pallet of beer, which is about 300 cases. But it's like a lot of the war, I know for the guys, I was 19 years old. I went over as 18. I was 19 at the time, and it's like we were left there to die. It seemed in a way, not totally. But yet we had the capabilities that if they gave us the go-ahead, we could do it. I knew we could, and so didn't everybody around me. We were proud men. We were Americans,
Mm-hmm.
They say the most dangerous thing in the world is an American with an idea. And we had the idea. We were just denied the process.
Did you, as young as you were, did you feel sort of confused? Like you say, they were looking for all the way out here in the United States at that time, the country, the kids your age.
Right.
And over there, it didn't seem like the Vietnamese were really too interested in what you were doing, one way or the other. And I can see where you'd feel a sense of isolation in the whole situation. This is interesting because you're extremely intelligent about your own feelings, which I don't get very often from the other young men that I talk to. What were your feelings when you did read about all this stuff that was going on here in the United States?
Well, there's a sense of hurt.
Yeah.
There's a sense of no direction,
Mm-hmm.
My father was a disciplinarian,
Mm-hmm.
and he never beat me or anything, but when he said for me to do something, I did it. So I was well prepared for the military service, and my commanders, a lot of my staff NCO that were ahead of us, some of them died in combat, so we got new ones, but the older ones were World War II veterans. And I could see the frustration in them too.
Yeah.
You take a hill, and 30 days later you get to go back.
Yeah.
And so it's like we weren't allowed to do what we were capable of doing.
Yeah.
I felt, well, I was confused. I was really confused as to what it is, or what the heck was I doing here if they didn't want me to be, but yet they wanted me to be because I was here.
Yeah.
And, but yet I never let that deter my thinking, in the sense, because up until, well, all the way through my course in Vietnam, I felt what I was doing was right. And not only that, it didn't become for country then. It became for me. What was going to happen the next day, I might live or die for. And what I was fighting for, once I felt alone, was I fought for myself. I no longer fought, I can say, for a country, because my country, in a lot of ways, had disowned me.
Mm-hmm.
I fought to stay alive. It became a game of survival. And I won no medals in Vietnam. I wasn't a hero. I did live through it, which is one of the greatest accomplishments of my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a survivor.
Mm-hmm. How did they maintain discipline? Now that's strange, you know. We're talking about we're in an unpopular situation, and you've got obviously what you're seeing is not really what should be done. How did they maintain this discipline? How do
Well,
you think they maintained it?
I think in the field, discipline was a matter of the strongest survive. And when you see your peers shine in combat, or a man lead you through hell, then there's a camaraderie or a sense of, it's just a camaraderie. So when the pecking order is established, you learn who to follow.
Mm-hmm.
You follow the wrong guy, you pay for it.
Uh-huh.
So discipline was a matter of following the leader. Now, the other thing is the Vietnam veteran was given a bad rap on drugs. I was in there from September 67 until October 68. I know of one man that was busted for marijuana. He had a joint on him or something.
Uh-huh.
And I experienced marijuana for the first time in my life. But it wasn't anything that I experienced it and I quit it because in combat situations, you had to have your head about you, totally. So I would say in all the time I was in Vietnam, I experienced marijuana once, and I saw one person get busted for it. But other than that, we had no drug problems. No one got high because it was a game to stay alive. And if somebody was high, you couldn't trust him.
Mm-hmm.
If he's your foxhole buddy, and he's supposed to be awake at night, and you and him are counting on one another to stay alive, then he can't be on drugs. And so as far as discipline or the image of the Vietnam veteran, as far as I'm concerned, my personal discipline is that I was trying to stay alive. I was trying to help my friends and buddies stay alive, and discipline wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
If your commander in the Marine Corps, you're trained that if your commander tells you to get up and move into a village, you got up and moved.
Mm-hmm.
They would threaten to shoot you.
Yeah.
Literally threaten to shoot you. They'd say, you get your ass in there or I'm going to bust it right here. And they meant it.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that. So we moved.
Mm-hmm. What was your last part of Vietnam like then before you got ready to come home?
Well, I was between Jilin. I rode fuel barges from Qua Viet to Dong Ha. I floated the river, Qua Viet River. I was at Khe Sanh for about 31 days. I went through over 1,000 rounds a day for 2 weeks, and
At Khe Sanh?
at Khe Sanh. And then when I was pulled out of Khe Sanh, I was sent to LZ Stud, which later became LZ Vandergrift, which was about 8 miles down the road. And then from LZ Stud into Khe Sanh, as they were tearing Khe Sanh down, I rode the convoys. And in the roads, we were so heavily surrounded and being attacked constantly, they finally closed the road. We couldn't make it by road.
Uh-huh.
And as far as what it was like, well, I had a friend lose it mentally. That shook me up. I had developed a good sense of foxhole religion at the time. was trying to make peace with God in case I was going to die, because I'd lived through the realities of death and faced death and the humility of death. And so it was kind of like it was a countdown. So many days till I go home. Mm-hmm. And plus I had my wife meet me in Hawaii on R&R. I spent 5 days with her there. And it never hit me until I got back that I'd even been there. It was like being at Disney World, I suppose, when you're 10 years old. And, I mean, just to be back to the world and see lighted streets and pretty faces, smiling faces, and no dirt and filth. And it was a scary time. I was still afraid I was going to die. But yet I'd gained a sense of confidence that I knew if I kept my head together, I stood as good a chance as anybody. I mean, I never gave up. I felt to the point to where I was going to die. I never felt that way. I had a sense of anger at that time, especially the last month or two, towards my, towards the U.S. at the time. By then it was blown up in what you could read. My mom would send me the paper. Stars and Stripes was never filled with that, but I got the local paper.
This job of floating down the river on barges, gasoline barge, did you say? Was that dangerous?
Oh, yes. We.
Where would you go from?
We'd go from the mouth there of the Quaviette, which was where the naval ships would unload fuel by a long line, and then they'd load it up into the little barges, and then we'd float back and forth, and we'd shoot everything in the water that had any mass at all, any sort of size. And I never was into combat at that point in time. One night we were stuck. I never got into combat on a barge, but one night we did get stopped. There was such heavy fire ahead of us. One of the boats about a half a mile up ahead of us was blown out of the water. So we pulled it over to the side, and then we set up a perimeter. And then we happened to be near Jialin, and then we radioed, and they sent troops. And so for an evening, we held off, I don't know how many North Vietnamese. There was a company of us holding off North Vietnamese. And it was a matter of position for them, not the fuel barge. Yeah. They were trying to close the river, is what was happening.
Yeah. Now, how long were you on this duty then?
Well, I floated the river for probably 3 weeks. And then I was gone constantly everywhere. I never really had a base. My mail would sometimes take 3 and 4 weeks to catch up to me. When I'd get a letter, it was a month old most of the time. Most of the time, if I was at the rear base, I'd get it within a week after it was written.
Yeah.
I went on some operations. I was on Operation Hickory 1 and Hickory 2.
So what were they?
They were search and destroy missions through the DMZ. The 9th Marines, I didn't know at the time, but my brother, he was with the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, and his division was moving them through the DMZ, and the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, 2-7 and 1-7, we were the blocking force in that valley off of Hill 881 and 861, and that was, I don't remember how many North Vietnamese we killed, but it was over 4,000 or 5,000 North Vietnamese, and my brother's company was wiped out to 6 men, and my brother was one of 6 men to live through that. His company got trapped in the middle. They pushed too fast. And
now, he was not in country when you were there?
Yes.
He was still there?
Yes.
Was that unusual?
Yes. Well, no, I'd say it was done before. I'd even arranged to meet him, and the day that I was to meet him, I got word from my commanding officer that he had malaria, and he was sent home. So he spent 9 months in country. I ended up spending.
Did he die from a result of malaria?
My brother died 2 years ago, almost 3 now, from cancer.
Cancer?
I believe it was Agent Orange, because the doctor told him it was an Oriental type of cancer, whatever that means. Plus, there's never been any cancer in our family. And he had tumors behind his nose, and it spread through him so fast that It was worse than the whole war.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Agent Orange. I had some questions there.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you were exposed to Agent
Oh
Orange?
yes, I know I was.
Where? I mean, what was this? What were the circumstances?
They were spraying on these operations before we'd go through. They'd spray for a week or two at a time,
Yeah.
and they'd destroy the foliage.
Right.
And I don't believe the initial contact with Agent Orange is what got you. I think it was more of a circumstance of not being able to cleanse yourself, because you might go 3 weeks before you get a bath, and your clothes, I kid you not, your clothes would literally rot off of you.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about how well supplied we were, but
Mhm.
I think that was in the base areas. I know at one period of time I never pulled my boots off for 90 days. I didn't have anything dry to put on.
Mhm.
So I can't say that I literally saw barrels of Agent Orange sitting there, but
Yeah.
I saw the way it twisted and knocked trees and
Yeah.
tree limbs and
Yeah.
foliage. And
Have you been tested for Agent Orange?
no, I've thought about it 2 or 3 times, and
Yeah.
I suffer a little hypertension. Not a great deal, but nothing like my brother. My brother didn't come back the same human
Yeah.
that he did when he went over, I don't feel.
Do you have children?
Yes, I have
Are they
2.
normal? And
Oh, yeah.
no eyesight or hearing problems or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super intelligent.
Well, that seems to be one of the residual effects of Agent Orange, is what genetically. Now they don't know. They can't. I don't think they've proven it yet, but
Well, it's like my brother's daughter. She's broke her arm twice now,
Yeah.
in the same place. And
they say genetically it has a great effect on succeeding generations.
well, that is the fear. I
Yeah.
believe the silent fear of the Vietnam veteran is the delayed death.
Yeah, the
Silent killer.
true.
I mean, we all have a lot of bad habits,
Yeah.
but nothing like that.
Never wounded.
One time I hit a shower door. I was standing in a shower and we had incoming. I was stark naked, and the guy, I was at a rear area. Whoever was on maintenance, there was a spring door on the thing, and I hit the door with my left hand and I drove a nail into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as close as, I mean, that's the only time I bled, but I never had a wound.
Yeah.
I was shot at twice from real close range. I had a canteen knocked off my back and a pack strap shot off my shoulder.
Uh-huh.
But
Did you wear a flak jacket?
oh yes,
Yeah.
that was as good. That could either be good or bad, because if a bullet hit a flak jacket, it'd flatten it out and it'd just blow you open when it hit you. But shrapnel, I've seen it save, injury. I can't say it literally saves lives, because when you're close enough to a detonation, there's nothing going to save you.
Yeah. Now, you said you fired 1,000 rounds a day at Quezon?
No,
Where was that?
there was over 1,000 rounds of artillery fired at us.
Oh, it's incoming.
Incoming. After I was there a while, I became a sergeant, E5
Yeah.
in the Marine Corps, and like when I went to a base, and I would work with the CO. Normally, the CO in these type of bases was either a captain or maybe a major. They were real small fire bases. And I would be put in charge of a perimeter line. I'd had enough experience, and I went through NCO school, and I'd call in naval gunfire and whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of it.
Yeah. Did they have any devices at night that you could see? Did they have any?
Starlight scopes.
Did they work?
Oh yeah, to some degree. It depended. If you had a little bit of moonlight, they had infrared. The tanks, a lot of times, well, when we were at LZ Stud and Quezon, we had the good stuff, because at one time General Giap was supposedly surrounding us with 47,000 North Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And the tanks would shoot infrared light out there, and a lot of times they'd be shooting tracers, and that thing would go off in the middle of the night, and you can't sleep. It's over the top of your head. And we used starlight scopes, and then we'd also, up until they close encircled us at Quezon, we'd go out on listening posts. We'd crawl out through the barbed wire and set up about 100 yards in front of the line in case of an enemy attack. And at one time when I was there was over 2,000 North Vietnamese laying in our barbed wire that were dead.
Uh-huh.
As a matter of fact, that's why North Quezon was, I believe, was closed, was because of the stench and the rats. The North Vietnamese were suffering from the bubonic plague, where we weren't. We were inoculated for it. Although it stunk constantly when the wind would hit you, it was gross. And we used to take turns shooting at bodies in the wire. And I know that sounds insane. It's kind of Neanderthal to think that way. But,
Did you ever get any rats in your outpost?
oh yes,
Yeah.
many a night. I've had them. When it would rain, that it got really bad because then they'd come in on you, and it was nothing to be sitting in a bunker. And if you weren't shooting a 45, the next guy to you was, and we'd try and shoot the rats. Yeah, they'd crawl up and they'd sleep with you. Now I was never bitten by a rat. And I can't say that I know anybody that was, but just the scare of that daggone rat being
Sleeping
in
there with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think you have to ask Mike Keene about that. I think it was Mike had the experience with the rat. When you heard the story? He woke up and the rat was sitting on his chest. Yeah.
Oh, I believe it. Well, a joke amongst us was that you couldn't run the rats off because they'd be standing in the chow line with their mess gear. They were so big.
Yeah.
And there were some big rats over there. They called them banana rats.
Yeah. Snakes?
Yeah, I was, we were moving the perimeter line at Quang Tree farther out, and it was in a weedy area. Quang Tree was a lot of white sand and no mountains in that area. It was all low land, and you could dig down 5 feet and you'd hit sea, but anyway, we were moving the bunker lines out, and I bent over to grab this bag, and I saw this thing fling up like this, and there was a cobra sitting there raised up probably 3 feet in the air. Naturally, the snake never could have bit me. I was moving so fast at that time.
Yeah.
And another time I saw a big boa stretched across the road as the convoy was going through, but it had been killed.
Yeah.
But as far as being in actual combat and having a rat or a snake come up on me, no.
Yeah. They didn't use any mosquito netting or anything there? Mosquito bars?
Well, I suppose they did. Yeah, in the rear bases like Dong Ha, they'd be dropping that stuff all the time, but we just lived with it. I think after you're out there so long, you get so tough to it that you don't notice it. And plus, we took malaria pills constantly, or once a week, horse pills we call them.
Did you ever get into Saigon at all?
No.
Yeah.
I was never, outside of Da Nang, I never saw a paved road or a block building.
Yeah.
It was all on hooches up on poles and that kind of thing.
Was the Tet Offensive on while you were there?
Yes, that was right, first of 1968.
And what happened to you?
Well,
Tet?
I was at Quang Tree, just outside of Wei, and
This girl's going to go nuts with all these names, I know.
yeah, well,
She's got a map, and you correct them anyhow.
I was at I was at Site X-Ray, or Quang Tree as we called it.
Yeah.
I think the military name was Site X-Ray, and this was when Wei was being overrun.
Yeah.
And we were under siege for about 5-6 straight days, and that was the heaviest sustained action I saw in Vietnam. I mean, literally to where they were crawling and moving in on us. They would mortar, and they would run in as they were mortaring. They'd have your head down and keep mortaring, and then they would run, and then as they'd led up, they'd hit the ground and start crawling, and then right at the last, they would still keep mortaring as their troops were coming in, and then that was, you didn't aim, you just fired, and that kind of deal. And after about 6 days, we stacked up over 900 North Vietnamese on a road. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, on the TV show 45 to 85, I saw that scene. I'd never seen myself at a place where I was in Vietnam, you know what I mean, at a time I was there. That was the first instance, because I remember that road and the way they were laid out on the road, and I don't know, that brought back a memory like I couldn't, it brought it back home.
Maybe getting ahead of myself, we're going to jump around, but as you look back, does it seem sort of strange to you that these people with no air support, basically no artillery, they had nothing, that they could overrun us all the time and win? I mean, that's phenomenal, I think.
Well, I won't say they won, but I'll say this: we never beat them.
Yeah.
We were never allowed to.
Doesn't that sound strange, though?
Oh, well, that goes to show you they had beaten the Chinese on 3 different occasions. And that's also, it was a civil war. That's something we never understood at the time. We were involved in a civil war. It would have been like France coming here during our civil war and getting involved. It would have changed the course or the history of this country to some effect. Not that it would have changed necessarily the outcome, but it shows you that you cannot defeat a free people. Or a determined people. It's like if we become an island, this country, and we're totally shut off from the outside world, we'll never be defeated.
No.
There's guerrilla warfare, and their sense of human value or value of the human life is still primitive in our eyes. I mean, there's honor in death in battle. I never saw that exhibited in the South Vietnamese, but I saw it exhibited in the North Vietnamese, because there was one occasion I know that 13 men, we killed 13 North Vietnamese that attacked our lines, and they had no weapons. They were testing our firepower. They had their chests packed with bamboo and mud, and I'm sure they were high on opium or something, but...
Why do you think maybe the South Vietnamese never had this feeling? It was their country.
We made the investment, though.
Yeah.
They felt secure in our being there.
Yeah.
We were at GLN. We secured GLN, which is the northernmost point of all U.S. in Vietnam. We were at the northernmost point. I mean, I could stand out in the morning and take a leak, and I was leaking on the DMZ. And we took that base and gave it up to the ARVNs, ARVNs. And within 2 weeks, we had to go back because they gave it up. They didn't have the desire or the leadership.
Did they have the skills? I mean, if you give them equipment, would they be able to use it? Or?
Oh, I think they had that. It's just, I don't think they believed in it. Not like the North Vietnamese. I think the North Vietnamese had the cause. They were the ones, in essence, that instigated the war, and or never settled for a divided line. And it's like the North Koreans today, they're the ones that are unsettled. They're not happy with the situation. And it's like if North Korea and South Korea were to fight again and the U.S. stayed out, North Korea would win. And I think that revolutionary idealism is stronger than the patriotic U.S.-backed idealism.
Yeah.
They depended on us. We never let them get their own feet on the ground. We backed the weaker force. It would have been like France backing the South during the Civil War.
Yeah.
The South never would have won.
Yeah.
The North was the industrialized part,
When you get close to the end of your term in Vietnam, what do they have? You still on the line, or still riding convoy, or?
Yes.
Did that irritate you?
Yes. I had a problem with that. I never got along with my commanding officer, base commanding officer. That's why I was always TAD. Anytime it got hot somewhere, he sent me. I think he resented me. He was a Mustanger. He'd been in the Marine Corps I don't know how many years. I'd been in the Marine Corps 19 months and was an E5. It's not that I was necessarily looking for it, but I scored well on aptitude tests and this and that. And anyway, I got into it with him a couple of times. We had some heated words, although he had all the heated words. I just had the snide remarks. And anyway, every time I came back, he sent me someplace else. And when I had 7 days left in Vietnam, he all of a sudden decided he was going to stick me back into fuel. And I had not been in fuel in 13 months. And so I had a week left, and they were closing down a fuel farm at Quang Tri. So from Dong Ha to Quang Tri was about 12 miles. So at night, I was running that road at night.
Why at night?
I don't know. They took 2 trucks and they said the road is well guarded. Well, my first night out, I was in the second truck, and the first truck was ambushed. And we hit that first truck. I actually had a car wreck in Vietnam. I was thrown from the truck.
Uh-huh.
And now all we did was receive sniper fire all night long, and I laid in a ditch underneath that truck. I'm scared to death. I mean, I was short. Well, I'm coming home. This guy's messing with my brain. And
Yeah.
anyway,
Were the trucks loaded with fuel?
no, we were just troops.
Yeah.
We were going down to help tear up. They were bringing back empty fuel bags or something.
Okay.
And so the next morning, right after daylight, they come and got us, and we went on down. We worked all day and then come back, and we slept for 2 hours, and he got us up and he says, you got to go again. So I got into it with him. I said, hey, I got 6 days left over here. And he made some remark. He says, well, if I have it my way, I'll bury you over here.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you get your you-know-what on that truck and you get on down there. And I was an E5. So I put up with it that night. The second night, no problem. And the third night, no problem. And on the fourth night, I'm a nervous wreck,
3 days left?
3 days left.
Yeah.
It didn't work out that I got to go home in 3 days,
Yeah.
so he started to send me the fourth night, or the fifth night, I don't remember, but I told him I wouldn't go.
We were talking about you're down to 4 nights until it's time to leave.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I told him I wanted to request mass, which meant I wanted to go up and talk to the commanding battalion commander. And I had went through NCO school at Okinawa, and I graduated second in my class. I mean, that was pretty high honors. That was the pride and joy of the Marine Corps. And I come out there with, I wasn't known as a slough-off. I was a guy, I had some good recommendations from commanding officers I'd acted under and been in combat with, and I had had enough. I didn't care if they sent me to jail at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I wasn't running down that road that night.
Uh-huh.
And so anyway, after I told him that, he backed off.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent my last 2 or 3 days in a bunker playing poker, which I won a camera from a guy. We didn't have any money, but we were gambling with whatever we had.
So then you went on down to where to get your Freedom Bird?
To what?
Where did you go to
Freedom
get?
Bird?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I remember that day very vividly, and I remember coming out of the bunker. The airstrip was right across the way from me at Dong Ha. I was at Dong Ha, that was my rear area. And I went in to see the old man, and he told me at that time, he says, well, Gary, Sergeant Heath, he says, I have no hard feelings towards you. And he says, I wish you the best on the States. And I had no respect at all for the man at that time.
Yeah.
And, I could have, I'm just glad we weren't in combat together,
Yeah.
And I remember I had a sea bag, and it was about 200 or 300 yards across that field, and I ran the whole way, and I was laughing, and I was crying, and I was dragging that bag, and I'd drop it, and I'd stop, and I'd pick it up, and I'd laugh, and I'd catch myself crying, and I couldn't believe that I'd made it. To think back at the day that I'd landed in Vietnam, and I saw all those names written on that chow hall, I thought back to that, and I thought, well, I'm one that did it. I made it. It was, what a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to describe that feeling. I don't think you can experience that twice.
Yeah. Where did you go then? To Saigon and then?
No, I flew took a C-130 from Dong Ha to Quang Tri, or to Da Nang, and then I spent 2 days at Da Nang, and I had the first hot shower I'd had in months, and I used to think I was tan, and after I got that hot shower, I noticed that all my color, I was as white as could be. I'd had a mild case of dysentery, and I was really light at the time, and lost a lot of weight. anyway, when I got all cleaned up, I looked kind of pale, you know. It was kind of, I hadn't seen myself in a mirror.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that, I hadn't seen myself in a mirror in months. I don't know. So from Da Nang, I flew to Okinawa, and I spent 4 days in transit there while we were waiting to get back to stateside, and then from Okinawa to El Toro, California to home.
You went military and then on the way back? Was military or civilian?
I went military just because of the money, the cost of the plane flight. I flew military standby, and I paid, I don't know, it was half fare or something.
Yeah. But I mean, your plane from Okinawa to El Toro was
All military.
all
right?
military.
Uh-huh.
And what was the mood on the plane going on?
Well, I'd say we raised one hell of a drunk when we
Yeah.
landed at Okinawa.
Yeah.
There were guys from all walks of life, and all of them had that sparkle in their eye again. It was before, you're so caught up with survival that it's hard for you to see life in someone else's eyes. It's like when you're in that combat type situation, you're always looking upon a possible face of death, and it was hard to see hope. And I think that when I got back to what we called the world, I once again felt, kind of light of heart. And I'd never had a light feeling. That's like that day I drug that bag across that field. I was having that sense of life again about me. I knew that I'd made a step beyond where a lot of people had.
Yeah. Then what happened when you got back? Wife is waiting for you? Or,
Uh-huh.
she's in California?
No.
Well, you come right on home then.
Right. I flew to El Toro. I had 30 days leave. I flew to Indianapolis, and I remember that it was so foggy that day, and I couldn't even see the end of the wing. Now I'm starting to lose it,
Yeah.
We get into some turbulence and all, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get killed,
After
First,
all this, huh?
yeah, the normal fears, I suppose. And my dad picked me up at the airport. And I didn't tell my wife. I called my dad at work, and I was going to surprise my wife, Anyway, my mother had a nervous breakdown at the time. My brother had been wounded, and then I was over there. And anyway, I didn't know it. She was in the hospital, so anyway, he brought me from there. He wanted me to go see my mother, first thing. Plus, by the time we got from Indianapolis to Marion, I was feeling pretty good by that time. He had a bottle of Old Granddad, I think it was. And
Celebrating.
yeah, kind of celebrating. Well, my dad and I think we'd reached a closeness that we'd never had before. It was it's an understanding that I think only two men can have. And before, I was always I knew the pecking order, and I felt a sense of being a man or his equal, and I think he sensed that in me for the first time. So we, I don't know, it was like from that day on, we've become the best of buddies, and it's, it's been everlasting since then.
Yeah. Well, then you pick up your life. How much longer do you have to stay in the Marines?
Well, that was kind of an ironic situation. I had about 11 months left, and I went from Camp Lejeune, or I went from leave to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and all of a sudden I'm back in bulk fuel. And
You bring your wife with you this
yes,
time then?
Yeah, she and I moved to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and eventually my son was born there. By the way, when I met my wife, became pregnant as a result of our R&R in Hawaii, and so when I come home, she's, 4 or 5 months pregnant. So my son is born at North Carolina, and I check into Camp Lejeune. What was the question again?
Well, how much longer do you have to last?
Well, I had 11 months. I was an E5 over 3 in longevity. But the problem is when I got to Camp Lejeune, there was about 1,000 of us E5s. We were a dime a dozen. I was back to scrubbing the head again. that made it kind of bad. But before I rotated out, I was one of the senior E5, so it made it nice again. My rank became worth something.
Yeah. Was there any possibility that you would have stayed in?
Oh no, no way.
Yeah.
I had, I was offered at that time $6,000 before I got out, $6,000 to ship over, free duty station, my choice of free duty stations anywhere in the world, and I would become an E6, a staff sergeant. But I'd had enough. No way. To be married, and when I went in the Marine Corps, my pay was $52 every 2 weeks, and I mean, it was hard to eat on, especially with a wife, and to raise a family that way. No way.
Mm-hmm.
No, I have no doubts I wouldn't stay in.
Mm-hmm. So you came back and...
Right. I went to work at Fisher Body. I worked there for 2 years, and I was a mild-mannered conveyor attendant. And I saw no future. My family was wrapped up in Fisher Body or General Motors. My dad retired from there a few years ago with 32 years. My oldest brother, Bill, when he got out of the Marine Corps, he was at Fisher Body. And then my younger brother, Wayne, he was at Fisher Body. And so my uncles were at Fisher Body. Everybody I knew was at Fisher Body. So after 2 years there, I decided I didn't like standing at the end of the line and throwing this one into this basket and that one into that basket. It got old. So I started college. And so for the next 4 years...
Full-time?
Yes. I worked full-time, went to school full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the GI Bill. I was going to save the money towards law school. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got tired. 4 years of work in school wore me out. But I did graduate with good grades.
You were the first one in the family then to go to college?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe I'm the first Heath since my ancestry came to this country to graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Mm-hmm. Was it tough to do, or?
No. In high school I did very poorly. I had no real respect. I've always been kind of cocky. So I didn't get along well with the teachers, you might say. But once I made up my mind that this is my life and I'm going to do something with it or not, then I did very well. I was surprised myself. I never knew what I was capable of. I never really applied myself. When I went to that NCO school, it really surprised me that I did that well in the class. And so I applied myself. I spent a lot of hours doing it.
Yeah.
No, school was fun. I majored in political science, and I think the reason why I did is the anti-war movement was going on, and I was still pro-war at the time. Or since we were there, I was pro-war.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into some very heated debates over, conscription or otherwise. And
You were one of the few, or you were one of
I
many?
was one of the few, but I was one of the few veterans.
Yeah, a
too.
few veterans that were going to school.
Right, and I think I provided or at least entertained the class with some other ideas, and I looked just like they did,
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that your training, I think we touched on that, it was adequate?
Oh, yes. I mean...
All the way around? NCO school and all?
Well, nothing really teaches you how to stay alive, other than knowing when to run. In the Marine Corps, we never retreated. It was called advance to the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And I was rather quick with my feet.
How about blacks? Were you associated with many blacks?
Oh, yes. When I was young in Cincinnati, of course, I grew up around them, went to school with them. And in country, they were just as courageous as the next man. Mm-hmm. I saw some, well, that brings up a point during the Vietnam War and right after, because when I was in country, I was with a black man from Indianapolis. I still remember his name, T. Garrett Dotson. And anyway, he was the first Mr. T I knew of, by the way. Mm-hmm. And when we were in combat together, he looked up to me because I'd had more time in combat. And when I moved, he moved. When I didn't move, he didn't move. Mm-hmm. And it's like he'd cover my back, I'd cover his. Well, that went fine when we were in the outpost and running patrols and ambushes and things like that. And then when we went back to Dong Ha, I remember coming up on him, and he was with a group of 6 or 8 of them, and he ignored me.
Mm-hmm.
So I called him a few slanderous names afterwards, and he tried to make up to me when we went back to the bush, and I told him to get lost.
Yeah.
He could die on his own after that.
Yeah. I think that's pretty well the analysis of the situation, that when they were integrated, they were okay. When they got off by themselves, it was big
Right.
problems.
Well, they're very, I think, they're culturally, or they're very tribal yet.
Yeah.
And I could sense that in him. I never understood it in my life. I mean, they were always just the blacks.
Yeah.
But after literally sleeping with a black,
Yeah.
and then him treating me that way, he would be insulted if he said hello to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from that time on, he insulted me, and I wasn't going to stand for it. And then, when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, is when Life magazine or whatever they hung a black guy at Camp Lejeune and cut him into 1,000 pieces with a razor blade because a black guy had beat a white guy to death in a bar the night before. And the MPs, my brother was an MP at the time at Camp Lejeune, and a guy, supposedly a white sergeant in a Corvette, pulled up to a club and blew away 2 black guys entering the club, nightclub.
Uh-huh.
Well, the MP stopped everything but a Corvette.
Yeah.
There was a lot of hatred there, and I stood sergeant of the guard there for a while, and I was locked and loaded, and I was told to fire my weapon because they were from the bowling alley to our barracks was through a woods, and there were 3 or 4 guys that were stabbed and beaten there, and it was kind of like the Nam again.
Yeah.
It's funny how that really turned around right there. I don't know what it was or what set it off, but there was a lot of racial turbulence. And I'd never experienced that before. I mean, in combat, you're brothers in arms, but stateside, you were a chump, and he was a,
Yeah. Huh. Did you join any veterans organizations when you got back?
I joined the American Legion in Marion. I've never been to a meeting. I think I joined because I felt I might be helping an old vet somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've not personally gotten involved. I've been so involved in my own life, family life, that
this age.
yeah, I'm not a joiner.
Yeah. Have you seen anything on the memorial in television or
yeah.
read about it? Have you been there?
I don't think I want to go.
Don't want to go?
Well, in a way I do, and in a way I don't. I'm afraid I'd break up.
Yeah. They say it's a very moving experience, regardless of who you are or what you've done.
Well,
it's an extremely moving experience
right.
to see.
They say it's not done by alphabetical order; it's done chronologically,
Right.
so that the men
Right.
can recognize
Right.
men that died with them. And I think I could go through some old names that
Yes.
they've just become faces to me now.
Uh-huh.
I've forgotten a lot of names,
But
and it would be very moving.
to get in there.
Yeah, because I don't think the Vietnam War, or for that matter, any war, really dies in the minds of the men that fought it. And it's just like tonight's experience. I'm talking about it again.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, it was all blowed out on the TV,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of moving for me again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a part of my history that is dead, and it's like someone keeps uncovering a grave. And,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm doing this is I don't fear it. It's just that, I don't know, you get a different sense about it. It brings on different emotions for me, and I get emotions not necessarily while I'm necessarily talking about it, but maybe in the quiet moments that I haven't felt in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moved by my own history, you might
Yeah.
say.
Good. Is this probably as much as you've talked about the Vietnam War in a long time?
Yeah, other than over a couple of bottles of beer with maybe John Bechtel or something
Yeah.
like that. Or my brother. My brother and I talked about it, but I don't have my brother anymore.
Yeah.
So I really, in 3 or 4 years, I've hardly talked about it at all.
Yeah.
It's never really brought up.
How about your personal life when you got back? Your marriage go on, no problems?
Well, we had some rocky roads. First of all, I didn't know women could be so possessive. You know, here I am. I'm 19 years old. I'm a combat veteran, and I mean a literal combat veteran. I have killed and been shot at, and then I've got this 5'2" woman that's telling me what to do. But you know, I adapted, and she's adapted, and I had some emotional problems for a short period of time. I had the trouble of settling down. It was difficult, and I know this sounds stupid, but it was really even difficult for me to sleep inside. I had slept outside so much over there. It's like laying in a bed, I wasn't comfortable. I used to, when I was still in the Marine Corps, I'd catch myself getting up to go lay on the floor. I wasn't used to sleeping in something that would fit to my body. But I don't know. Where are we at? What was
We were
the
just
question?
talking about what adjustment we were making.
Oh, well, I went through a time of having to stay out late. I missed that let's go camping attitude, or the camaraderie of being outdoors, the ruggedness, the spirit of the moment, like who gives a damn, and let's go do it.
Macho.
Yeah, the macho thing.
Yeah.
And for me to settle down, all of a sudden it's like somebody walking from daylight into a pitch blackness. I mean, it was difficult in finding the gray area for a long time, and that's what I was doing, I feel, or I thought, now that I look back, that is, was adjusting to slowing down. I mean, you know, when you take a 17-year-old kid, looking back at it, and you take somebody 17 years old and for 3 years you drill into them, kill, or, you know, that type of macho whatever, for them to just stop, it's almost impossible. I don't know how you can't shut it off. It's not sane to just shut it off. I think there needs to be something like that. I went through, for a period of time, I never got into drugs. I had too much personal pride for that. But then again, you know, I would hang out at night, maybe drink a little too much, and then I'd go home and my wife wouldn't understand. And I didn't understand that. See, I was still fighting a war, although I didn't kill anybody that day. And, well, anyway, I outgrew that little. She was very patient with me. And I think that's why our marriage has lasted, is she stood by me, she saw my shortcoming, and she helped me through it.
Yeah, great. Anything else we haven't covered tonight that would be of interest for the record?
Well, I don't know, it's all personal feeling.
You feel like you're a better person for
Oh yeah.
having been there?
I'm not afraid to make decisions today. It's helped in my business. I'm an owner in Speece here in town. I'm very confident in my movement. Decision making, as I said, is not a tough thing for me. I'm pretty much, I'm mature enough now at 36 years old. I can be fair in my dealings with people, but yet I'm stern because I know what it's taken to get to do, or to get where I'm at, I feel. Not that I'm someplace special, but I think that combat experience is it's everlasting, and in a lot of ways I'm very honored that I'm even asked to be here tonight, because I've never had an official capacity to represent the Vietnam veteran. And some things I wanted to clear up is when I was in Vietnam, was that we were in combat. The real war, the Vietnam War, was fought in the year that I was there. It was fought for about a 4-year period. Then it went downhill, the actual combat. You were safer in Vietnam than you were to drive from here to Marion. But when I was there, they were killing 1,000 to 2,000 Americans a week and maiming thousands of others. And the Vietnam veteran, as I knew him, was 18 to 19 years old. And he wasn't a druggie. And I was around Marines. We weren't mama's boys, but we were young, scared, and proud. And no matter, as much as we felt our country let us down, because there was that sense. It wasn't a spoken word at the time, because no one really wanted to believe it. But there was an understanding going on, I couldn't understand why they're blowing away a man that wants to be the president of the United States, and his brother was already killed. These things hurt. Martin Luther King, I didn't understand at the time. I only knew him as a black leader. But now that I've educated and all, I realize what he did for this country. So the whole Vietnam War, and the American people went through a very dramatic, it was a revolutionary time. A lot of things changed and were turned around because of the Vietnam War, and we're still learning and changing. You would have thought after Korea that we'd have never entered a situation like Vietnam, but that came to a draw, so nobody lost face.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vietnam veteran was as fine a fighting man as there ever was. And I think any young man that fought in that war, his father would be proud of him. We didn't turn tail. Well, there were times we had to back up, but we never turned tail.
Yeah.
And I can only say that had they let the man in Vietnam fight the war, we'd have won it. But it just wasn't to be, I guess. We feared, this country feared other things. But we didn't fear a thing, because we had been trained and were competent enough to handle any situation.
Yeah.
And you surprise yourself in combat, what you're capable of doing. Things you don't think you can do, you can do. You don't think you can get up and move, and you're sick to your stomach, but you get up and you might throw up, but you get up and you move anyway, because Daddy can't teach you that.
True. One thing that struck a chord with me tonight was you talking about twilight on the perimeter, and that's about the most lonesome time that you'll ever have in your life.
Oh, yeah.
When it's just getting dark and you don't know what's out ahead of you for the night and who's going to stay awake, and God, you'd give it anything for sleep, just to sleep.
Oh, you'd be so tired. You'd see that fog rolling in.
Yeah.
You were afraid to go to sleep.
Oh, hell yes.
You didn't know if that sleep was your last.
That's right. But I mean, it's a lonesome time, when you get twilight, because you know that the natural protection of light is going, and you're on your. And in World War II, of course, we had no night scopes or infrared or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, the average bunker in Vietnam didn't either, but that's when all your fears and your subconsciousness worked loose.
That's right.
I've envisioned 100 Vietnamese coming through that wire at times. I've opened fire at times, and I'd wake up a whole line over nothing, when I was first over there. Oh, yeah, I'm scared to death. As a matter of fact, after you got to be an old salt, all you had to do was get a newbie into your hole, and he'd stay awake all night for you. You didn't have to worry about it.
You didn't have to worry about that. Very true. Well, thanks, Gary. I think this has really been a nice interview.
Sure. Well, thank you.
I appreciate this very much. This is George Dingledie.